The purpose of Columbus Day was to encourage Americans to be more accepting of immigrants, specifically Italian immigrants.
This is the one group that they actually care about. They're like, don't be racist to Italians. Okay? No, we're against discrimination of Italians. Yeah, no. Do not be bigots towards Italians. That's it. Yeah. Hey everyone, this is an amazing topic, and people always say that I don't do enough theory on the stream, so I've got a book right beside me to teach us things as we learn along with PragerU, the newest university hit in Florida, especially for kids. If you want to learn about history, nothing more to love than why you should love Christopher Columbus, because he created America, and he's the foundational hero of the whole North American experience that we know today, and Christopher Columbus is unfairly judged by all these, purity testing leftists. You know, the ones who just want to get like wins. They just want to act edgy. They're like, did you know that he was like a monster that actually like trafficked children so that those indigenous children could be sexually assaulted by a whole bunch of his men and things like that? And like, oh yeah, but like, are you really telling the truth, or were things just different back then? And everyone was doing it. Was he just basically a character of his time? Everyone was kind of racist and into slavery back then. White people certainly were, Western Europeans anyway. So that's just maybe what everyone was into. I mean, he's not the only participant in the North Atlantic slave trade, I'll have you know. All right, and some of those slaves weren't even captured. Did you know that? They were actually sold by, yes, black people, yes, in African nations. So who was the real bad guy after all? Checkmate, lefty, gotcha. Look at the globe emoji. Let's learn why Christopher Columbus is the greatest hero of all time.
As Columbus Day dies a slow woke death, it might be a good idea.
I love this already. A slow woke death. Yes, not with a bang, but a whimper.
To consider how this national holiday came about in the first place. The answer might surprise you.
Ooh, we got a reporter for Breitbart News as an authority on the topic.
Ready for it?
Okay.
The purpose of Columbus Day was to encourage Americans to be more accepting of immigrants, specifically Italian immigrants. The Italian explorer, once universally regarded as a great hero, was the symbol of the holiday, not the focus of it. Here's the historical context. Following a mass migration from...
See, it's weird because like the first, I know Wikipedia is not a great source, but we could use the source of the source and go to there afterwards. But it says the first sentence is a federal holiday in the United States, which officially celebrates the anniversary of Christopher Columbus's arrival in the Americas. That's literally the first thing. And then Columbus went ashore in Guanahani, an island in the Bahamas, on October 12, 1942. Christopher Columbus was, and then goes on, and then doesn't even talk at all about celebrating immigration. But maybe that was, I mean, we have to learn.
Southern Italy, beginning in the 1880s, the status of Italian Americans was at an all-time low.
Oh.
How low was clearly illustrated by one of the single worst episodes of racial violence in American history. The mass murder and lynching of 11 Italian Americans in New Orleans in 1891.
I'm gonna give you credit here for brazenness. Because I'll be honest with you, I haven't seen this spin before. I haven't seen someone using this, yes, historical fact to try and justify Columbus Day. This is new uncharted territory up here in PragerU. And by the way, if you want to look towards the history of the persecution of Italian Americans, you should also look towards the history of what exactly racism and whiteness is, and why different categories of groups were seen as lesser than, including Irish and Italian Americans who weren't seen quite as white enough for the general populace. Yes, things like this.
Hatred against the Italian newcomers had been brewing for years, and was openly encouraged by leading newspapers of the day. For example, in 1882, the New York Times ran an editorial under the headline, "Our Future Citizens," in which the Times stated, "There has never been, since New York was founded, so low and ignorant a class among the immigrants as the Southern Italians."
Yeah, white supremacy is fucked, isn't it? Like, you can't even be white enough. Talk to the Roma people. Like, come on. Talk to Jewish people who are still not considered white by white supremacists.
1887, the same New York Times wrote approvingly of the lynching in Mississippi of a man they referred to as Dago Joe, Dago being an ethnic slur for Italians. Anti-immigrant sentiment was especially intense in New Orleans, where Italians were settling in large numbers. Local papers accused them of working for below-market wages, engaging in all manner of crimes, and being more loyal to the Pope than the president. These seething resentments broke to the surface when the city's police chief, David Hennessy, was assassinated in the fall of 1890. As the chief lay dying in the street, a witness claimed to have heard him say that Dagos had shot him.
This is still about why immigrants should love Columbus Day, by the way. Still, it's up there. You can't hide from it. That was the purpose of this lesson. But we're talking about anti-Italian discrimination that's been occurring.
In a response, authorities rounded up hundreds of Italians, eventually charging 9 of them.
It's the most surprising part about this is PragerU is staking out a racism bad position. They are, but this is the one group that they actually care about. They're like, don't be racist to Italians. Okay? No, we're against discrimination of Italians. Yeah, no. Do not be bigots towards Italians. That's it. Yeah.
With complicity in Hennessy's murder. When their trial resulted in 6 not guilty verdicts and 3 mistrials, the public was outraged. Further inflamed by the local press, some decided to take justice into their own hands. According to journalist Aaron Blakemore, here's what happened. Thousands of angry residents gathered near the jail. Impassioned speakers whipped the mob into a frenzy, painting Italian immigrants as criminals who needed to be driven out of the city. A group of vigilantes stormed the prison.
This is wild to see because, like, obviously, yeah, bad thing. Don't try and, lynch human beings for being part of a specific ethnic group. That's a bad thing, PragerU. But in every other example of this happening in history, or especially like, say race massacres, like there's no PragerU video in Tulsa. If there was, it would probably be upon how they brought it upon themselves or something like that, And it'd be like, oh, they try to tell you because of woke indoctrination that this was necessarily a bad thing. But did you actually hear about the potential sexual assault of a white woman that may have occurred or may not have occurred? Don't look into it. But either way, I mean, it's not all fairy tales that they try and tell you in these woke schools.
Grabbing not just the men who had been acquitted or given a mistrial, but several who had not been tried or even accused in the crimes. Shots rang out. When the shooting stopped, 11 bodies were riddled with bullets and torn apart by the crowd. Outside the jail, the mob cheered as the mutilated bodies were displayed. Some corpses were hung, others were plundered for souvenirs.
So the only time they'll ever take this position is when it's related to Italians. Good to know. PragerU.
The next day, the New York Times celebrated the crime with a headline that read, "Chief Hennessy avenged. 11 of his Italian assassins lynched by a mob. These descendants of bandits and assassins are to us a pest without mitigations," the Times editors wrote. In protest, the Italian government broke off diplomatic relations with the United States. Tensions receded only after the U.S. government
Columbus
paid
is
an
coming up for
indemnity
sure.
to the Italians.
I mean, fair enough, we don't have a lot of time. We're already over the vast majority of this video. We've only got a couple minutes left, but they are going to get to why Columbus was actually good, I'm pretty sure. Because if they don't, I mean, I brought my own materials today. I wanted to bring sources, and I'm pretty sure it might not be on the same wavelength. I mean, it's hard to tell what with everything being what it is.
Despite the New York Times' incendiary rhetoric, much of the country was outraged by the massacre. In his 1891 State of the Union address, Republican President Benjamin Harrison pledged to protect foreign nationals from mob violence. Then, in July 1892, Harrison issued a proclamation celebrating the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus's discovery of the New World. It was a timely pretext to a greater purpose: to raise the status of a badly shaken Italian-American community. Harrison's proclamation did more. Italian-Americans now had a way to include themselves in the American story. And not surprisingly, New York City figured prominently in that narrative.
Yeah,
in the late
discovery.
19th century, one could say that Italian immigrants essentially built the city's infrastructure. According to the Library of Congress, they went to work on the growing city's municipal works projects, digging canals, laying gas lines, building bridges, and tunneling out the New York subway system.
Yeah, discovery, as in, like, how Putin just discovered Crimea? He discovered it, first time. Anyone's ever seen it. And so that's why it's totally justified for him to annex it, because he discovered it. He's just an explorer in the modern age.
In 1890, nearly 90% of the laborers in New York's Department of Public Works were Italian immigrants. But of course, Italian Americans have made countless and enormous contributions to every area of American life over the nation's 250-year history. At least one signer of the Declaration of Independence was Italian American. Many cabinet members and Supreme Court justices have been of Italian descent. Not to mention,
Still waiting for you to get to Columbus. You've got less than a minute remaining. Because, yeah, I will agree that you shouldn't discriminate towards people based on their ethnicity. That's a pretty universal standard everyone should apply. And I also completely agree with the history that Italian Americans were discriminated against in American history. And that has a lot to do with, again, white supremacy and what was considered to be or not be part of the other group, what is considered to be white or whiteness. That's why the Irish and the Italians were considered the less desirable immigrants, because there wasn't mass migration coming from a whole range of different continents at that time. So there was different forms of white people arriving to the Americas. So the discrimination was still there, but it was just discrimination between different groups of white folk, you know?
and legendary athletes like Joe DiMaggio, Nobel Prize-winning scientists like Enrico Fermi, and many prominent artists, actors, and actresses, including the most beloved singer in American history, Frank Sinatra. In 1937, President Franklin Roosevelt proclaimed Columbus Day an official U.S. holiday. But if a new mob has its way, it may not be one for long.
Because
I'm Alana Mastrangelo, reporter for Breitbart News for Prager University.
I feel I came too prepared for the class by even bringing this, because I was like, I wanted to read y'all quotes by Columbus, but we didn't even get to talk about Columbus. That's not a lot of fun. Now I gotta go scroll through the book and get to the first chapter. I would highly recommend, if you were like, just, hey, is there a book of the histories of the Americas that you know, explains a lot, and a lot by which I mean pretty in depth. I would definitely recommend Howard Zinn's book, People's History of the United States. But we're going to read a direct quote, because obviously Columbus is someone who gets unfairly tarnished by some of not being a product of his time. But was he a product of his time? Indeed. So we're going to read the writings. So when Columbus and his sailors came ashore carrying swords, and this is, okay, well, let's start from the beginning. Arawak men and women, naked, tawny, and full of wonder, emerged from their villages on the island's beaches and swam out to get a closer look at a strange big boat. When Columbus and his sailors came ashore carrying swords, speaking oddly, the Arawaks ran to greet them. They brought them food, water, and gifts. So just so we're setting the stage here, Columbus arrives, the indigenous people also immediately, they were known to be friendly. In fact, even Columbus himself wrote about them. So this is what Columbus would write in his log. This is his own words. I'm not changing them, not manipulating them. This is Columbus's own words upon greeting the indigenous people. They brought us parrots and balls of cotton and spears and many other things, which they exchanged for the glass beads and hawk bells. They willingly traded everything they owned. They were well built, with good bodies and handsome features. They do not bear arms, and do not know them, for I showed them a sword. They took it by its edge and cut themselves out of ignorance. They have no iron. Their spears are made of cane. They would make fine servants. With 50 men, we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want. So, if you arrive to a new location and you meet some people and you're greeted by those people and you're treated incredibly, imagine after being on the seas for so long, not knowing where you were going to end up and thinking that you had finally found this passage, that they were looking for this coveted passage. But no, lo and behold, you discover the new world, and you discover an entirely new group of people, and they're beautiful and they're kind and generous, and they give you gifts and all that stuff. And your first thought is, oh, these motherfuckers could be slaves. Oh, we could enslave them so easy. They got no weapons. They got fucking smiles and generosity. What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? And of course, people will contest that with being like, yes, it's well known that Columbus did involve himself in human trafficking, quite a bit of it, and also the human trafficking of minors for the sexual assault of children. Indigenous young women were raped, of course, by a lot of his men. That kind of stuff, just grotesque stuff, which even by the standard of the time would be seen as kind of gross. But you'll still get the defense of Columbus, and you'll still get the like, well, yes, but a lot of people back then we're doing some fucked up and shady shit. And while that is true, right, I do want to point out that Columbus had followers at the time. One of them was a religious figure, Bartolome de Casa. And Bartolome de Casa initially came over to the New World as well, just like Columbus, with the mentality that they were, of course, going to enrich themselves. Gold was their chief priority. They really, really wanted gold, and that was a really big thing to them, and that they were going to enslave the people. Well, Bartolome de Casas actually had his own journals, and he wrote of their experiences there, and he completely flipped when he was there, he realized both the generosity, the kindness, and humanity of the indigenous peoples there, and saw what they were doing to them, including in some ways, if they were not allowing themselves to be enslaved or didn't, help them round up other members of the Arawak community to be able to be enslaved by Columbus, they would cut off their hands and hang them on their necks so that others would see, them for who they truly are. Barbaric shit like that, like Game of Thrones tier shit. It was real. It was happening. Even by the standards of the time, the barbarity of Columbus was known to be so horrific and atrocious that people were speaking out about it in that day and age. His own fucking crew was writing about it and being like, yeah, this shit is cruel, barbaric, inhumane. Like, how could you do this to a group of people like this? Fundamentally evil shit. Like, just twisted and gross and grotesque. And it's not something that anyone in the modern day has to take blame for or consider themselves responsible for. If you're an Italian, you can say fuck Columbus. Absolutely you can. You don't have to be like, well, yes, maybe he did a few fucked up things. Everyone was back then, but it is what it is. No, I'm not here to say that you're supposed to take away your ability to have Italian pride. Enjoy. Y'all have amazing food, cuisine, music, history, literature. And yes, a lot of fucked up shit in your past. Seems like all of these fucking empires do at one point or another. You've also gone through a fascism that's happened too, and it's happened to a handful of other countries as well. Spain's gone through a fascism. Has Germany? Hard to know. But either way, a lot of countries have gone through that kind of shit before, obviously. But in the modern day and age, if you happen to be a proud Italian, ain't nothing wrong with that. I'm not here to tell you not to be a proud Italian. I'm not here to tell you not to be a proud Irishman, not to be a proud British person. Any single fucking country. That's not what it's all about. But I'm also not telling people to rewrite history. To rewrite history. Don't do that. Teach true history. You can teach about the barbarism, horrors, and atrocities of Columbus and the genocide of indigenous peoples, because that's what happened. That's the reality. People, again, if you look at the writing of Bartolome de Casas, he saw it for what it was. He realized how barbaric it was even in that time. This is not like fast forward and now he's got woke indoctrination, and now because of his woke indoctrination he's got to be like, I need to virtue signal. You probably shouldn't sexually traffic children. That's bad. No, even at the time he was like, this is horrifying, and it is certainly against God's will, and what we are doing is a great evil that will never be forgotten, and everyone should know the horrors and atrocities that we have done as we have slaughtered and enslaved and murdered an entire people until their numbers are dwindling down and brought over disease, of which is just fucking massacring the rest. Like, even in that age, he was able to see it for what it is, write it down, and be like, this is bad. So no, not by the standards of the time was Columbus just operating the way all people did. And even if he did, that's still bad. Even if it was just that's bad. That's bad. We can now look back on it and be like, yeah, fucking slavery bad. But even by the standards of the time, he was a racist ass, human trafficking, horrifying human being. And so no, you don't need statues of him, because when you make a statue of Columbus, that's a moral judgment. You're saying in the modern age, even though we know everything that happened back then, we venerate this individual. We venerate him and we put him up as a fucking effigy, a figure, even though one of the commandments said not to do that, we're doing it anyway, and this is it. And yeah, I mean, it's 2023, but still, I mean, there were some good things. Would we all be here, be it not for Columbus? Did he not save us? So that's why you can be like, fuck that motherfucker. Honestly, it's not even an edgy thing to say. It's just fucking history. Just history, Our principles of history should be agnostic. Romanticizing history is overwhelmingly used to inject people. Well, not just with brainworms, with fucking nationalism, right? How else are you supposed to love an empire and all it does if part of you is like, but it did bad things, maybe?
Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form. Available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback, because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
Thank you so much for watching, everybody. This show is produced by amazing people like you, and if you want to help us out, please consider donating over at patreon.com/theserfs. The show is made possible thanks to Amazing Fletch, Anna Loves Riley, Ariane McCarthy, Cheryl Alvarez, Doug Cady, Everything Important, Hagbard Celine, Laminia Panza, Matthew Scarborough, Multimondi, Omni, Peanut Butter Blondie, Political Pappy, Quiet 185, Rachel K, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Ruby K, Sir Nickus, Spinach Monster, Stellar Vision, Sebastian Demo, Tech Tink, Trevbot EXE, Words Greenwood, and not to mention all of the amazing and fabulous people you now see before you.